proper attention, and I think it's done that.
But I don't know that we're providing the service that a person really needs.
In terms of, are we talking animal control now?
Yeah, we're
Okay.
talking animal control. 5, 6 years ago now, I called one day because I got 2 shepherds. I knew right who owned the shepherds and everything, and I owned shepherds, running around, constantly running at large, and they told me we don't have the personnel to come out and ticket them or capture them or anything. And I said, well, what do I do? And she said, well, we have a cage that we could bring out, and you can see if you can live trap them. I said, bring the cage.
Wow.
So they brought the cage out, I set it up, they hadn't even gotten back to their office. 20 minutes later, I had that dog. Well, I didn't get both of them, but I got the one. And I called them up, they come back out, and I thought, what kind of a monkey business is this?
Yeah, I wish I would have known about that.
You know, and I've heard that comment before. And I don't know because I haven't called them since, but if that's the level of service we're providing, we'd be better not to offer the service.
Yeah, I don't think that's the norm, Commissioner. I'll let Fred try to address that.
I have a story,
Okay.
similar, but it's been how long was that?
I'd say probably 5, 6 years ago. In fact, it was my neighbor's
Maybe another year or two
dog.
before that. We had a dog that for some reason liked our dog and kept coming around.
It's called in heat.
No, it was not.
We're digressing. But go ahead.
It was not.
The health department, we're talking about animal control.
We are digressing. But yeah, I couldn't get anybody to come out and take
Oh,
care
I
of
know,
it.
but that seems like there's
If
more
you had
significant-
cat licenses, we would have no budget woes. There's enough cat,
Well, you
there's enough cats in my
you could
neighborhood.
capture
no
the cat that
cats.
visits my garage on a daily basis.
Dick, when I went to NACO, there was a technology company that actually
we're
had
losing
software for
control.
licensing animals,
We're losing
and they had a
control.
picture of
Can
a
you get it
cat
back
there.
online?
And I said, you can't be licensing cats. And they go, yes. There are cities and counties around the
Oh,
United
yeah.
States that are now licensing cats. I go, you got to be kidding
Well,
me.
there's a lot of,
Why not?
there's a lot of places that
If I
have
have to license my
limitations
dog,
on how
why don't
many
you have to
can
license
have at
your
one
cat?
time.
I know. I said, I can't wait back.
I'm sorry.
Remember
to
that-
I have
bring
a
up
question
animal
for Fred
control,
that doesn't
Fred.
involve animal control.
Remember that lady that lived out by Glen Arbor? And
Which one?
she got arrested for hunter harassment. What was her name?
Got arrested for what?
Hunter harassment. She went out there and was setting up.
Oh, I know
fires.
who you're talking about.
Yeah, they moved away now. But she came in here one time, her and her husband, and pushed for cat licenses.
Fred, I'm sorry. 6
Okay.
hours is apparently.
You know, for a
Anything
while.
else to talk about, Fred?
Unhinging the brains here.
You got anything else to talk about, Fred?
I have a question. May I?
Oh,
Thank
answer.
you. Okay. Has any part of the state budget that affects your programs been approved yet? I mean, do you have any indication of there's going to be issues with things like the youth and wellness clinics and so forth?
This came through at 1:50 p.m. today. It said, ink still drying on tentative budget settlement. And it said the budget leaders, the legislature and the executive office reached agreement this week on state budgets to wrap up this fiscal year and start the new year, which begins October 1. So Monday, I'm going to Lansing, and we're going to meet with the director and get some ideas of where we stand. So, I mean, this was my real fear, and I put it in my memo, is that there was predicted back in July that we may have this deal where they have a continuum state budget after October up through the first of the year. And, you know, we even had a shutdown 2 different times because they couldn't come with budget. But apparently, for whatever reason, the legislature and the governor have come to some sort of a tentative agreement. So that will give us a better indication of where we stand. Because
The leadership.
the leadership,
The leadership.
yeah, they haven't voted on the final bill, but.
Well,
yeah,
yeah, but even to get this far is significant compared to where they've been the last few
It
years.
is.
Right, and so that we may have a better, a clearer ideas of where we stand. I do know they got $318 million of federal aid for education that wasn't anticipated until just recently. And that may offset the anticipated cut in Medicaid that they were thinking of. Because, I mean, that if they did a significant cut in Medicaid, well, then that would definitely affect our programs. And that's why I made it difficult, is it to what we're going to do, what staff would be kind of moot if an entire program disappears. So we would obviously adjust to that
Yeah,
as budgetarily.
okay.
The last indication we had from, with regards to the Adolescent Health Center, the Youth Health and Wellness Center, they've told us will be funded at 100% rather than 90%. So that was one of the last changes that I had factored in here. So it looks like we're going to get an additional $17,500 for that clinic. So that
Is this the one in Kingsley?
Yes.
No, this is the one on Parsons Road.
Oh, okay.
The Kingsley Clinic funding was going to remain the same. It's only really partially funded at 3 days a week, but we're going to be able to operate it at 5 days a week due to a Medicaid match grant that we secured.
See, we got, was that I reviewed it, 30,000 from Rotary Charities and another from Art Schmuckel, Art and Mary
Schmuckel
Schmuckel.
Foundation.
And then Jerry was able to get this Medicaid match, so we bumped it to
$138,000.
$138,000.
You people hear that? At the grand opening down to the Adolescent Center the other day, he stated that fact. And I couldn't believe Jerry took, it was 35,000, right?
Yeah, it was $37,000.
37.
And it's just a one-time opportunity that, was made, I was made aware of by the advocates for these clinics. And it's like, since this was a startup clinic, there's special Medicaid match funds that, are available. So we were able to take those local funds, have those contributors send it directly to the state, and it was $37,000, and then when it came back to us, it was $138,000.
So they grew at $101,000. That's remarkable.
Yeah, we don't get to do that very often, so.
Yeah,
Well, still, yeah, but doing it once is good. Particularly this year.
Don't tell the state because they want to recalculate it.
Yeah, that was really good.
How did you know about that program? Or that
Just from the advocates for the adolescent clinics. It's just like I got an email from, and I don't think anyone had done it before because it was kind of, it took forever. We started it back in first part of the year and we just got the money literally like last week.
So the county was sharing the cost of the adolescent clinic here in Traverse City, right? Before, a couple of years ago?
Well, we have a match requirements, 30% of the grant funding. We have to provide match. I mean, in that case, it's very simple because it's on school grounds, so the cost of the building is kind of
Okay.
pretty much.
No,
taken care of.
I thought we were actually appropriating money to that.
Well, we do, we allocate indirect costs, which are not an allowable cost under that grant, so that's also, like
Yeah.
another form
Oh,
of
okay.
match for it.
All right.
That
Commissioner,
building,
but-
if I recall, that building was donated and moved in there, and then all of the contractors that did work to get it operational donated that pretty much exactly at cost.
Okay.
Right, and the school also, they pay, all the utilities on that facility. They provide us with internet connections, phone service, so the school's been a tremendous partner there. Now, the Kingsley Clinic's a little different situation because we had to lease the space. It's
Right.
off-site, so we'll be looking for other forms of
Yeah.
match in that situation.
Nice to have a little good news sometimes.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Anything else?
Well, in another department, it's not on our list,
Thank
but
you.
I've got a question.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Actually,
Thanks,
more than
Fred.
one.
Thank you.
Thanks for being patient, guys.
Thank you.
That's all right, it's education.
Hello.
Dean, your department is impacted in this budget. How will that affect your services?
Well,
I'm sure it's negatively, but
it will have an impact on us, but unlike the county clerk that deals directly with the public or the sheriff's office or even the jail, I have the ability to schedule work. I don't anticipate that our workload will decrease. If anything, it seems like over time with the new audit requirements or changes in accounting standards, or, assisting the grants that we had through the AARA, the federal grants. There's always new requirements. We're working with, the departments to make sure that we comply with those accounting and financial reporting requirements. The biggest impact, I think, will be on the services that we provide directly to the jail. I have one of my accounting technicians in the jail pretty much all day Monday, about 60% of their time. I think that's a vital function that we perform. We've had issues in the past that we have not had since we've been in that operation in terms of managing the funds that come in.
I'm concerned about the cut in
I
Dean's
am
office.
too, and
Dean
that's
is
why I
the
bring
first
it up.
one, to always offer to reduce, and I'm concerned that this is a reduction that's going to impact our ability to get the support work done to all the departments. And so if we go forward with it, which he's insisted on, and I'm going to support him on it, we're going to have to monitor it very closely. He has an employee who wants to reduce down their hours, but I think it's important that we monitor it closely, and we may have to reinstate it, because it's too critical of a department to allow this to, fall by the wayside. We have to get the work done.
All right, the other thing I want to ask is, I'm going to put Linda on the spot as well. We have not heard from you, Linda, and you are impacted in this budget, your department. How do you believe this is going to impact the public if we reduce your staff?
We'll be reducing hours available to the public. We can't maintain our lunch hours and keep the 3 offices open, 3 counters open. So what we're looking at is reducing our lunch hours to half hour. So our time that we're working shorthanded, which is really stressful, it's our busiest time of the day, will be limited, and we'll either be starting later or closing earlier.
Thank you.
Janet?
Yeah.
I have just 2 quick things, I believe, if we're under discussion item. I told you Wednesday night I'd have something prepared for you. I know it's a relatively minor nature, but I put something together. I don't want to go over it right here, but you got it in writing in terms of the $500 differential for the COG dues, so I think we need to do that. And so I've got that in your packet. The other thing is I had an opportunity to come in early and just started a discussion with Dennis about kind of how we're trying to figure out what kind of format we were going to use when we come back and kind of sit back and do our thoughts on all this discussion we've heard over the last couple of days. And so Dennis and I kind of talked about it. And I said, well, maybe we can put something together for the commissioners at the end of the meeting and just kind of suggest a way of doing it, or we can do something different if someone has a better idea in terms of the format. So in any event, Dennis was kind enough to just put a couple key points together. And basically, the thoughts were that, we normally open up the meeting with public comment, and then we would go into, does anybody have any further revenue proposals? And one of the revenue proposals is this one-time stipend thing that I don't know if we're going to have enough time to look into by then. And then we would, at the first meeting, somebody asked the question, well, how are we going to deal with not only the fund that we have in terms of contingency that we built, but the additional fund balance. So Dennis said he would be happy to come in with a staff recommendation based on everything we've heard and where he thinks the priorities are as a starting point for us. And then we would get into how the commission felt about the staff recommendation by position or by issue. And then if anybody else has any other suggestions, comments, or anything they'd like to change or add or whatever, we can get into it at that time and then try to summarize how we want to move forward, whether we want an additional day to talk about it. We can just kind of map it out as we go, but this would be like a starting point. So, we had reserved Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, September 20th, 21st, and 22nd for that. So, any event, Dennis was kind enough to try to quickly put something together before the meeting, and I said I'd be happy to speak on it since I was really the only one here and engaged him in that discussion. So I don't know, what does everybody think in terms of the starting point? Is this a way to go, and then we can just move forward from there?
We have the recommendations from Dennis and Dean.
If the board wants those recommendations, frankly, I want to spend some time with Dean tonight, kind of working on them a little bit, because I think we're going to, well, I'm gone next week. I'm on vacation next week, and so he's in charge. So any questions that you have, please refer them to Dean. We'll be talking regularly, but my hope we will have them when we send out the agenda for Monday. We will have all those recommendations included.
Because I would like to have some time to be able to review those, so.
Yeah, so I'm thinking we would do that probably next Tuesday or Wednesday.
Okay.
Have those out to you.
Okay.
Don't we have a meeting scheduled for the 20th? Maybe that's.
Yeah, Monday.
Yeah, that's what we're talking about.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
would like to get those recommendations prior to that
They'll go in the
meeting.
packet that gets sent to the commission.
The other thing is recommendations for, not only how to use the contingency and the fund balance, but also any recommendations that you have on things that you have heard where you would increase that revenue. You know, any of the things, do you see what I'm saying?
We would put a complete recommendation together. I haven't talked to Dean, obviously, but some of the initial recommendations that we had in our initial idea, I want to relook at them with Dean, because of some of the things I've heard here in the last 2 days. So, we would bring a recommendation, we'd look at the issue of revenue. We're going to look at the $200,000, in terms of the custodial contract, but, what I was hearing today is perhaps maybe we'll look at, but we'll get you a recommendation and you guys can look at changing that. I mean, I thought it was kind of a unique idea. I didn't think it was the way Danny wanted to go, that some of the commissioners had about maybe if we reduce down one janitor, it saves about the same amount of money. I think that's worth looking at. So we'll put together what we have, and we'll look at the revenue ideas. Dean has talked very briefly with Lori. She has nothing in writing on what the tax, the CIP is, but she had a guy down in Lansing who did the calculation for her. They're the people that are going to decide it, so, we'll try to we'll look at that a little bit. That may be when you get to that part on additional revenues, you may want to talk about that. We have a couple of other small ideas that we may be able to look at, so, but we'll have a recommendation together for you that I think you could, if you want to, could start off of and then kind of work from there.
And all the other discussion about how obviously two departments are have taken the biggest hit
Right.
here. And I was intrigued by Jason Jones' presentation. He was talking about, trimming little bits of money, but when it got all done, it was $40,000, which is, not insignificant. Have all the other departments gone through that same procedure?
Yeah, I think every department looked at that. That was the first thing, obviously, they did, is look at those other line items and try to cut that. I'm not going to make a generalization and tell you that I know that every department did that, but everyone I can recall that Dean and I met with personally and went through their budgets, everyone I can recall did that very thing, and they trimmed everywhere they could, and then they went to personnel.
The problem was when their budget, when their cuts got to be larger, not numbers of dollars, the only way to cut that's personnel.
Yeah, but you're asking about the other operational line items, and yes, they did. They went through that.
But the people you met with were only the ones who were asked to make significant cuts, right?
No, we met with everybody.
Everyone.
Oh, okay.
I keep trying, but that's okay. My personal preference is to address our priorities first. And I will tell you right now, and my priority may not be yours, my priority is public safety. And one of the things that I would like to address first, as we look at our budget, is the Sheriff's Department, the Prosecuting Attorney, and 911 Central Dispatch. I think we need to address, this is my personal opinion, I think we need to address those first and everything else after that.
I would agree with that.
Thank you.
Bottom of my list is Parks and Rec, because it's a nice thing to do, but we don't have to.
And we need to look at that as well. We need to look at other departments where we might be able to move money and put it into our priorities, which may be, or may not be, because I certainly haven't heard from the board, 911, Sheriff's Department, et cetera.
I'm in the general path of what you're talking about, but I think there were some other key areas that we're talking about, like, for example, if we're not going to have liaison officers, I don't know how we can do without a truancy officer. That's just my personal opinion. But why don't we just try to do this, is that, I think Dennis kind of understands the reflection of most of our thoughts through this process, and that, Dennis, could you, in your recommendation, do it by sort of what we think the priority would be on the top of the list and then move down, rather than just a general list of items that you think should be saved? I mean, is there a category you think you could give us in your recommendation where you think, there is the highest priority from your perspective or the staff perspective, or not?
You said you were prioritizing your recommendations, weren't you?
Is that, or not?
What we were doing was we were taking all of the positions that were eliminated. Thank you. And we put them in 3 priority categories: the highest priority category,
Okay.
medium priority, low priority.
Okay.
And I think as a generalization, I could tell you, we very much, I would prefer to give you Dean and my recommendation, and then let you modify it the way you think is appropriate. And I can tell you, having said that we give high priority to those things that I've heard mentioned here. And there are some other things that we give high priority to. Now, I'm going to, just in very preliminary numbers, I did some work with Dean yesterday. When we went through the first time and we prioritized high priority, they came up to roughly the amount of money that you have set aside to put back into the budget. Now, they may not be the things you want, but it kind of matched pretty closely. So I would, but let me give you a different example. There will be some departments where Dean and I think there may have been 2 or 3 positions cut, and we think one of them is a very high priority, and we think others may be secondary priorities or third priorities, and I've broken them out that way. And let me also say this just as a general statement. I think it's difficult sometimes for these department heads come here and they make their presentations to you about the importance of the positions and those kinds of things. They want to support all their employees, okay? And when Dean and I have an opportunity to sit down with them one-on-one, they support all their employees. Every one of them have done that. But when you get down to really pushing to where they can cut and where they can't cut, they've intimated some things to us that help influence the recommendations we're going to make to you. So, where they might come into you and say, I need every one of these. They may have told us, I need every one of these, but if I'm going to lose some, these are the ones that are less critical.
Well, it's analogous to what we do. I mean, we would like to support every department.
Exactly.
And we hear everybody here, and we would like to give everybody back what their budget cuts are.
So I think Dean and I have a pretty good feel of where they're at. You, though, have to look at it, of course, and say, yeah, that may be fine, but we have these other priorities we got to take care of. But we can give you a starting point, I think.
Yeah, and there's 2 other things we have to throw into the mix, and one is the, for lack of a better term, supplemental spending. The
Programs. Additional programs, is that what I'm hearing?
I'm talking about the money that we fund other people.
The appropriations.
Appropriations to other people that are not our departments. I mean, it's one thing when we're running a department.
Yes.
And another thing when we're giving $20,000 to the TBEDC. So, I mean, so you took some of that stuff out of the budget, you didn't take it all out, so we have to talk about that. And then the final thing is, of course, seeing if we can find little pools or pots of cash that we can convert.
Pilfer?
Well, not pilfer, but convert back to fund balance and use,
Well, and that's why,
Mary, at the road commission.
Yeah, there you
She
go.
can take and examine.
And that's
the
why,
budget.
Commissioner, that's why when I talked to Commissioner Inman, and we were just, as the vice chairman, I was saying, how do you want to organize that meeting? That's why we thought doing the revenue piece first was a good way to go, because I think it's important to go through those other fund balances and say, hey, look, we've identified another $200,000, let's add that to the list. It's just one way to look at it, but we can do it any way you prefer. And I will bring you, in that packet, you will have all the programs like we promised you, and which ones we funded and which ones we haven't, the special things,
And
appropriations.
how much right now is recommended for those appropriations versus how much the
Yep.
appropriations are total, because one thing, like we mentioned with the Parks and Rec, where, they've taken a little bit out of their budget here and there, and every little bit adds up. It
Yep.
just does. Could be the same thing. We could look at the appropriations and decide to make many of them, but just cut a certain percentage amongst all of them.
And I would hope too that, and that's why we put revenues first, so you'd have an idea of how much you had to work with, but, I'm assuming some commissioners have ideas of other places in the budget where they can make cuts. And it just seems to me prudent to kind of go through those up front and say, here, I think there's another $30,000 here, do you agree? And then add it, so you have a number that you can work off of, and then go through the cuts and other things you want to add back in, and say, well, this is how much we have now, what do we agree on, But it's however you want to do it.
Well, I found money at Twin Lakes.
There you go, see?
Hey,
Perfect example.
But my question, when you said fees, some of the departments that we did not hear from, actually one of them comes to mind, is the Drain Commissioner, where he is recommending fee increases.
Right.
We have not heard from him.
Right.
And I'm assuming that would come under revenue proposals, and we would have to make a determination if we are not going to increase revenues.
Yes.
Where we're going to get the money.
Yeah, it's such a complex issue. Yes, I think that's why we talked to you about it the first night. And I would hope that if commissioners look at the fees, we broke them out and handed them out to you, and you say 25, which you very possibly could say, I think I'm saying it, 25% increase in drain commissioner fees, that's an awful lot, okay? I'm willing to do 5 or 10. Somebody who feels that way needs to put that on their lists of things they want reinstated out of that
Money.
pot of money that we have.
Well,
Yes,
because
we can't forget that.
But on the other hand, the Drain Commissioner's been extremely austere over the last several years.
Yep.
And I did ask Dean for this, and I'm sure it's on his list and probably at the bottom, because I asked him this like yesterday. But I asked him for a list to try to see how departments how their expenditures have been over the last several years, because I don't want to penalize a department that has been frugal and has been, fiscally responsible versus a department that's been just growing and growing and growing. I want to address that.
My office, we will provide that information next week. We're a little bit backlogged
I know
right
you
now.
are, and I'm not
But I
meaning to.
did, if you look in last year's budget book, we did provide a departmental analysis in your budget book last year that's 2007, 8, and 9, and we will update that so you have those
Okay.
earlier
I can
years.
dig out my last year's budget book. It's
But just in case
it's on
you
the
wanted to
floor
take
in
a
my
look at
house.
that shorter period of time, you
Yeah.
do have that.
And Dean, I'll check with you. I found this revenue by source, and it has the revenues year by year by year. Do you know how current this is, or should I show it to you first?
You can see it from there.
No,
it has a date
well-
on it, and I dug it out of a file, and I'm not sure where I dug it out from.
I
There's
can't
also-
hide, you guys know where I am, so
Well,
call me.
Well, no, I'm going to show it to you right now, as soon as we're done here.
I'm aware of that one, and when I have my person who does most of that work back next week, so we'll update
So
it.
what you're saying is, at this point, you're not sure how current it is.
I know that's not current.
It's not current. Thank you.
Can I make just one closing comment? I guess I've been sitting in this chair for a long time, and I know Sonny eloquently always refers back to the 2004 challenges that the board had, and those were very difficult. But this has been the most, I think, challenging, difficult time of my tenure on the county board. and in terms of going through this process. And I would like to really compliment Dennis and Dean and all his team and his department heads and everyone that was involved in this process of coming up with this information and being very well prepared and having answers for us, readily available for the most part. And I know that it's been extremely tense and challenging on the management side with the prospect of people losing their jobs and their livelihood and those kinds of things, and the endurance that Dennis and your department heads have had to go through to try to deal with that. I can't even envision the things that you guys have gone through over the last 60 days. So I just want to, as best as I can, compliment Dennis and Dean and his staff for everything that they've done to accumulate everything to try to make this job, even though it's most difficult, they've given us everything we needed to guide us along. So, I just wanted to thank them personally for that.
Thanks, I appreciate that. But I will say that whatever anxiety or things we've gone through is paled by those people whose positions are on the line and are worried about losing their jobs. So.
Anything else?
To adjourn.
Can't do it. Got on public comment.
No, sorry, I'll make it
No public comment. Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
I didn't hear anybody make
You
a
gonna take
motion.
those?
So moved.
Support.
Can I? Thank you.